Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me for another episode of the Titans of Food Service podcast. I appreciate all of you. To those who are watching on YouTube or listening along on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or however you get podcasts, I just want to say thank you for listening. And I hope, as I've mentioned on other episodes, that there's at least a nugget or two that you can take from every episode. I know myself, I have taken away so much from all of this. And it really reassures that the food service industry is very close knit and we can rely on one another. And there's so much knowledge to go around. You just have to ask. On this episode, I welcome Kristine Bowen. She is the region president in the Pacific Northwest area for Sysco. She has had an incredible career. She started in the retail alcohol business and moved her way all the way up the Sysco ladder. It's an incredible story, and there's a lot of pieces to take away from it that I think you're really going to enjoy. So without further ado, let's jump right into it. Kristine, welcome to the Titans of Food Service podcast. I'm so, one, grateful, and two, excited that you are joining me here today. I have always admired you, and you've built an incredible career in food service. So thank you for coming on today.
Oh, thank you. My pleasure. And I was quite honored that you even asked me. So right back at you, Nick.
Of course. Well, thank you. Well, why don't we go ahead and just jump right into it? Why don't we go back to the very beginning? How did you first get into food service?
Well, actually, it was quite by accident. At the time, I was living in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, had two small children and husband who's not the husband anymore. But we were looking to relocate to the Portland, Oregon area. So I was coming out of working in the retail alcohol industry and did a lot of, shelf management, category management kind of stuff. And so I was really kind of aiming to get into that as well in the Portland market. And it just so happened that there was an opening at Sysco as a marketing manager at Sysco Portland. And that was my first dip in the water with food service. And, transitioning from a retail background into food service was, kind of a bit of a learning curve initially. But it definitely has turned out to be probably one of the best decisions I've made in my professional career.
Yeah, definitely. And how did you find Sysco, or how did Sysco find you? How did that work?
Well, it was actually, again, a little bit of an accident because Cisco had hired a recruiting firm to try and help place somebody in that role. And the person from the agency was in one of those shared services office buildings and was right across the hall from my brother-in-law, who was recruiting for IT kind of positions. And these two recruiters started talking, and she said something like, "Hey, I've got this position. I can't find candidates." And he said, "Hey, my sister-in-law has a marketing background and maybe she would be a good fit." So we got on the phone and we talked, and lo and behold, it started to kind of unfold. It was a bit of a longer journey because, I had to relocate from Edmonton down to Portland, but that's how it all kind of came to be. I would say the stars were aligned because that just doesn't happen, right?
Yeah, no kidding. No kidding. And when you first started at Sysco, what were some of the roles that they had you do?
Well, I was hired as a marketing manager, but at the time, it was connected with merchandising. So I was chasing down all of the certificate of insurance and hold harmless agreements for every supplier we dealt with. I was handling all the samples that, gone are the days that, our salespeople can handle samples, but I was responsible for handling all of that. In addition to the regular marketing stuff, I was also doing all the billing for bids and any kind of contract pricing. It was before that we had even our department now known as profit management. So I do recall in my very first couple of months walking back into my boss at the time, and I put one hand on my hip and I said, "I got a bone to pick with you. I was hired for marketing. I got this, this, and this. There are thorns in my side." And he said,
Right.
"Oh, in due time, those will go away." Well, I accelerated that, and in 6 months, I was doing what I was hired to do, which is, really the fun stuff, marketing, promotions, food shows, all that kind of stuff.
When you were in retail, were you in marketing when you were on the retail side as well, or was this marketing venture new for you?
No, I was also in marketing on the retail side, and prior to being on that retail side, I worked for a independent television station and did marketing for them. So that was kind of, a bit of my background. So marketing is transitional to a different type of business, but retail to food service was definitely a bigger leap than I expected it to be.
Sure, sure, that makes sense. And tell me about your journey within Cisco. So you started as the marketing manager at Cisco Portland. Where did you go from there?
Well, I was at Sysco Portland for the first 10 years of my career and continued to move up into different levels of leadership, all in marketing. And then I met Saul Adelsberg at one of our conferences, and he at the time was working at Cisco Los Angeles, and he said, "Hey, we need to talk." And so he kind of put it in front of me to come to Cisco LA as a vice president of marketing, and it was an honor. It was, again, a move for me and my two daughters, but it was a well worth move because it really put me in the top performing Cisco location from the time, and certainly a much bigger Cisco location than where I came from. So I went
Right.
there, and I was with Cisco Los Angeles for 10 years. And, I could see sort of the future state writing on the wall. There wasn't going to be a vice president of marketing at every Cisco location. And so I started gravitating to anything that I could learn, and knowing that I needed to learn a broader scope of the business so that I was much more marketable in my future career at Cisco or anywhere else I went. So that's when I started getting more involved in, negotiations and projects, anything and everything that would come my way. I would say, "I'll do it, I'll do it, I'll do it." And that's kind of how it unfolded. And then when we opened Cisco Riverside, I took the leap and went into merchandising, and that in itself was scary at first. I thought, oh my goodness, I'm not going to sleep for months because not only were we opening a brand new company, from tilting up concrete walls with hard hats on to actually seeing it come to life. I was working in a merchandising capacity, which I hadn't ever been in before. And so thank goodness there were some really strong foundational people in that team that helped along the way. But I'll tell you, Nick, it was the best experience of my career. And the reason I say that is it really stretched me. It really put me in a kind of an uncomfortable place, but I learned so much, and I learned more about myself knowing that I had a greater capacity than I would ever give myself credit for. So from that perspective, I would do it over again in a heartbeat because now I know what I didn't know. And so
Hmm.
therefore I would be much more comfortable with the experience. And it was probably my greatest learning experience of my career.
Wow, that's fantastic. And it seems like you got in and you started moving up pretty quickly and you started to stretch yourself and whatnot. But in that process, was there any setbacks or drawbacks or failures that you had to overcome?
Well, um, I don't know that they would really be a setback. I feel like, for each and every one of us, if we continue to just broaden your scope and, look for new opportunities, even within your own organization,
Hmm.
it just helped me know what I wanted to do and what I didn't want to do. And, that in itself, as much as merchandising was a great learning experience, I discovered after the fact it wasn't my favorite spot, you know. So
Right.
I wouldn't say it was something I wouldn't would unravel because it was a good
Sure.
learning experience, but it certainly wasn't my favorite. I think the world of our merchandising teams. They have a very difficult job, and they are way better at it than I was. So from that perspective, I wouldn't turn back the clock and switch it, but it's certainly an area that I look back fondly and say, wow, I'm glad I'm not doing that anymore.
Yeah, no kidding. No kidding. And I believe Cisco has to have what, thousands of employees, I would
Oh, yeah.
imagine.
Hmm.
Um, so when you look around, you're in a huge organization. What do you think it was that um, that you did differently than others that pushed you forward in your career? Because I think there's a lot of people that want to move up, but maybe they don't know how to.
I think that one of the most important and pivotal things for me was having some mentors early in my career.
Mm.
Arlene Murphy, who was the vice president of sales for McCormick, she was a fantastic mentor to me very early in my career. I looked up to her. She had, really taken on a big role in a industry that wasn't really known for having female leaders at the time.
Mhm.
And I just completely admired her strength, her directness, her ability to still have that EQ side that's so necessary for survival in a professional environment. And she was definitely a person that um, I looked forward to every conversation, and I would just,
Mm.
soak up as much as I could from her. And another person that was very pivotal in my career, as you can well imagine, would have been Saul Adelsberg.
Mhm.
Saul not only was, he instrumental in getting me to Southern California, but taking a chance on me when we opened Riverside. And there was a point in my career where I really didn't know that I wanted to stretch and move up further. And a big part of that was, my mom lived in Southern California. I was close to
Mm.
her, and I didn't want to have to be relocated. And I knew if I was going to continue to advance my career at Sysco, I had to be 100% relocatable. And I wasn't willing to be away from my mom at that point. As she was
Right.
aging, I wanted to be there. And unfortunately, when she passed away, it was horrible as we lose a parent.
Yeah,
But
definitely.
it was also a time when I went to Saul and I said, okay, I think I'm ready. And he said, well, it's about time. And the reason why he said that was he was one that believed in me before I believed in myself. He was
Mm.
behind the scenes advocating for me before I even knew it. So he was a big advocator, cheerleader, whatever you want to call it. Um, Basically, working on my behalf to continue to help me elevate my career. And for that, I'm forever grateful. But he was willing to give me stretch assignments to help me learn more about the business rather than staying in that lane. And I got to tell you, anybody that wants to continue to grow, don't just drive down that lane that you think you're going to be in. Shift gears, move to the left, move to the right, get off the freeway every now and again, get back on, have a different perspective. But you really, really need to stretch yourself and
Mhm.
try new things. And that's going to not only get you noticed, but it's just building your portfolio for opportunity.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Living in Southern California, and being in food service myself for about 7 or 8 years now, I've met Saul Adelsberg in passing, and whether it be a food show or vendor fair or
Hmm.
whatever it may be, and everybody always talks so highly of him, even down to the operator level, because I believe he was an MA at one point
He
in
was.
his past, and his relationships are always so strong. Um, and it's incredible how many people that he has impacted, and the amount of just how much he's been able to really get himself out there, and people view him so highly, so it's quite incredible. So when you're at Sysco Riverside, where did you go from there?
I went back to Los Angeles as executive vice president, and I'm thankful that I didn't have to get relocated during that time. I was able to stay locally, and during that time, in the scheme of my education and continued learning, Cisco had a executive vice president development program. They have a different program now, but the one that I did was fantastic. And it was really a way to give you some of the skills that maybe you didn't have. If as you came in through marketing and merchandising, maybe you didn't understand the finance side or the operations side. So it gave you the opportunity to dive in a little bit deeper. And at that point, being at Los Angeles, it's fast paced, it's big,
Mhm.
and you learn fast because if you don't, you're going to get left behind, right? And
Yes.
then I got the call to come to Cisco Seattle, and that was a great opportunity for me to get back to the Pacific Northwest. I love it here. Yes, it rains a lot, but it's okay. I can deal with the rain. But it's been a great journey.
That's awesome. That is so cool. And in your current role today, what does the job entail, let's say on a monthly basis?
Well, since we went through regionalization, I now have the Pacific Northwest region. So that includes Cisco Seattle, Cisco Portland, and Cisco Spokane. And we have a cross dock facility in Juneau, Alaska, that services that Southeast Alaska area. So in total, I have about 200,000 square miles of geography that's under my responsibility, and 1,200 people that roll up into the Pacific Northwest region. So
Wow.
it's big, and unlike some of my counterparts that have two locations and they're 70 miles apart, they can come together for meetings. It just doesn't happen in my region because we're so spread out. So I'm on
Right.
the road every other week. Like tomorrow, I'm headed to Portland for the rest of the week, and then I'll spend time mostly with our operations team. I've learned a lot about operations over the course of, hiring and the pandemic and training and
Hmm.
retention and all that good stuff. But it's fascinating to me. That side of the business is just completely fascinating. And so I'll spend time in operations, and then I spend time uh, occasionally out with a key customer, or with one of our district sales managers or director of local sales. Then I'll be back and I'll be in Seattle for a couple of days, and then I'll head to Spokane, and then I come back, and then I'll be in Seattle, and then I go back to Portland. So I do this little triangular trek, if you will. uh,
Yeah.
I'm on a plane a lot, but that's
Yep.
okay.
Yeah. I guess when you travel more, you probably just get used to it.
Yeah, and they're
I
short flights, so it's not that big a deal.
Yeah, that's a good point. I've never been to Alaska, but I imagine that's probably not too far of a flight as well.
It's about, I want to say it's like 2.5 hours,
Oh,
but
okay.
it's it's not that bad. It's the only way you can get there is by plane or by boat. There's not a
Definitely.
connecting highway to get to Juneau.
Gotcha. I remember back, what was it probably 2015 or 2016? My dad and we had just started our company, and we would come and visit you ever so
Hmm.
often, and we'd present whatever products we had at that time. For us, it was slow to go in the beginning, but I think that's like any new business. And I remember when we'd have a meeting, we'd present whatever items we had to present. And at the end, you had a piece of paper and you wrote down all of your notes, and you got a copy and we got a copy, and then we signed it as well. To like, these are the follow up, main
Yeah.
points to follow up. Is that something you still do, and where did you learn how to do that?
Well, I'll tell you, it seems a little archaic to have a three-part NCR form, right? I mean, we just
Right.
don't do that anymore, and I don't use it anymore. However, the reason I started using it was, without revealing names, I had a meeting one time, uh, and the supplier across the table said, the last time we were here, which was 6 months ago, there was a big conversion that was going to take place, and we paid, and it didn't take place. And I was just completely embarrassed, that the other colleagues at the table hadn't done what they said they were going to do. And I thought, I don't ever want to be in a predicament that we didn't follow through on our commitment. So that's how that kind of came to be. And I found it to be quite functional for all parties involved. And it's like, hey, if I captured that wrong, it's your opportunity to make that correction, and vice versa. And
Hmm.
when we sign off on it, that copy didn't leave my desk until we checked every box and said, we fulfilled our commitment to you. Because to me, fulfilling those commitments was building trust. And
Yeah.
we needed to have a trusting relationship as, partners in the business. And, if you don't have that trust, you don't go very far.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, being on the receiving end of it, I was like, one, I knew I have a perfectionist kind of mind, so I was like, I have to fill this out. I have to make sure I follow up. But then on the other side, I was like, I feel like she really cares about us, especially when we're starting out. I was like, man, she just really cares about our business, and this is important to her. So it's
Yeah.
definitely, it's equally as important to me. So I've never, in all of the 7 or 8 years that I've made calls on operators or distributors, I've never seen somebody else do that. So the process definitely works, and it keeps everybody, I would imagine, on task and,
Hmm.
accountable.
Yeah, for sure.
In your current role right now, what are some of the goals that you are pursuing?
Well, a big part of it is stability, right? Coming out of the pandemic over the last few years and having the ups and downs of the start and stop of business, the restrictions in the restaurant industry, and just rebuilding your team, in
Mhm.
particular in the operations side, the drivers and order selectors, which are very vital to success of the business. Um, that to me is the probably the number one priority is stability. Which I'm happy to say that we are in a stable position in the Pacific Northwest. There were times where it was a little rocky,
Yes.
but we're on our feet and we're really grabbing market share and we're delivering to customers and we're leading in this market, which is fantastic. Another one of my big goals is just to continue to advocate and mentor others because one of the
Hmm.
biggest things that I'm all about and hope to leave as a legacy when I leave the food service industry is that I too can look back and see how many people I have influenced or touched in advancing their career. And I make that a very top priority for the folks in my organization just within the Pacific Northwest, but even beyond that. I'm a
Right.
big supporter of mentorship. However, I will say that if someone reaches out to me and wants me to mentor them, they own that relationship, right? So
Mm.
I'm very upfront with them. I said, I'm going to be giving of my time, but you got to come prepared and you got to own scheduling the appointments and blocking out the time for the two of us to have those conversations. Because if somebody isn't invested in it, then they don't get anything out of it. And so
That's a
that's
great
why
point.
I kind of turn it on that person to say, you own it.
I love that. I love that. Um, you mentioned when you're at down here in Southern California with Saul that he believed in you well before you even maybe knew of it. Do
Hmm.
you have people like that yourself that you see? Maybe they're leaders now. They don't have leadership roles, but they're leaders that are on their way to move up, and you're advocating for them.
Oh, absolutely. And there are folks, and this just recently happened in uh, our region where our very long time VP of merchandising retired. And so we're, on the search for another candidate, and there are definitely some highly qualified people, but there was, one person in particular that I believed is kind of, similar in the way I was, had always stayed in their lane and yet has so much more capacity and so much ability to learn and
Hmm.
contribute and super high EQ. And I went to her and I said, why aren't you applying for this role? And she kind of looked at me like, are you kidding me? Like, what, me? And I said,
Right.
yes. And lo and behold, interviewed, went through the whole process, and ended up getting the role. And she wouldn't have even done it had I not just gone in and really kind of pushed her to think about it differently. And so that that's just an example, but there's many, and I think you just have to look at the core of that person, and do they have the foundation of going places and being a bigger contributor. And I think some of the secret sauce in that is definitely having that high EQ, because you got to
Hmm.
be empathetic, you got to be caring. Gone are the days where you can lead with a heavy hammer. So I think it's really important that each of us take responsibility to develop that next generation of food service leaders.
Definitely. I feel like when I'm at a Cisco event, I see there's one the diversity of people within the room. I see people of all different ages, and it's something that I feel Cisco has done a very good job of over the years. And especially being myself, a lot of times I'm 29 today,
Oh,
a lot
happy
of times I'm the
birthday.
youngest person. Yeah. Being the youngest person in the room, and it's great to see that Sysco has become an organization where they bring in people from all different walks of life and train them and give them opportunity. I think that's really great. When you started at Sysco as the region president up in the Pacific Northwest, did you begin that job pre-pandemic or post-pandemic?
Pre-pandemic. I started here in July of 2018.
Ah,
So I had like a year and a half maybe before the pandemic.
yeah. I'm curious, how did you? I could speak for California, where I'm at. A lot of things were economically, it was very difficult because a lot of our customers, their doors were shuttered. What was it like for you navigating that with the position that you have?
It is one of those things that a lot of folks that have been around for a long time miss the autonomy, right? Miss the
Mm-hmm.
ability to make their own decisions. And I got to tell you, at that juncture, I am so thankful that there were other people in our corporation that were coming together and providing very scripted direction on what to do next, because this is areas that none of us had ever navigated through
Oh
before.
yeah.
So each and every step was very thoughtful. What we had to do with product, what we had to do with people, how did we approach the customers, how do we come and support customers through so many different sources.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that as I look back, I say, geez Louise, I sure was thankful that those people were in those roles to make those tough decisions, because that would have been really hard to do them independently. And you probably would have had
Right.
hundreds of different outcomes across the organization versus one. And I believe that
Yeah.
that was what provided us some strength.
That makes sense. Do you collaborate quite a bit with corporate or um, with other region presidents?
Oh, all the time. You kind of have a circle of folks that you can pick up the phone and they're going to be there. Saul is one of them, but there are many others. And we also have the support of our market team, which is fantastic. I'm not going to be the HR expert, and I know I can find an HR expert with our market team. Those kind of resources are invaluable. Many of them have been within their craft for a long time, and they've probably seen everything uh, more often than I'll ever see in different situations that can help guide us to the right decision.
That's incredible. What? How do you view businesses different today than maybe when you started in 2018 and 2019, right before the pandemic, or is it getting back to how it used to be?
I still think we have a long way to go. We saw, unfortunately, a lot of independent restaurants and even in some emerging chains not survive the pandemic. And, unfortunately, some of those small independents were the fabric of what made a city a foodie city. And so I think there's a little loss there. But what I have seen just over the last, 6 to 8 months as we've exited out of the pandemic and started to see stability is there are more unique flavor profiles and restaurants that are popping up that have kind of emerged into their own. Like, I'm not going to be like everybody else. I'm going to be unique and I'm going to do it my way.
Hmm.
Those are the kind of restaurants right now that I think have got that groundswell of, something new and different, and people are following them. And I think a lot has been learned in during the pandemic that people, are utilizing all of these delivery services, delivery apps, more so than they ever would have. Their takeout and to go business has stayed strong, even though the pandemic is behind us. That in itself has changed the way the operator is approaching scheduling and food costs, because there's so many more pieces that come with takeout packaging and such. So I think that there's a lot that we're still maneuvering through. But I'd say that I've seen the fabric of the foundation of the city foodies that has really changed.
I like that. I like that. Do you see new like entrepreneur restaurateurs entering the space, or is it more maybe chains that are increasing their number of units, or what does
I think
that
it's a
look
little
like?
bit of both, a little bit of
Okay.
both. I think some of those emerging chains that, did well during the pandemic, especially if they were, quick serve or something along that line, they're continuing to grow. But what I have seen in the independent restaurateurs is those that survived or those that are entering into this space now have a different strength than they used to. This is that time of year, that January, February, where some of them that survive the holidays or barely survive the holidays are thinking about, I just don't want to do this anymore. And we didn't see that this year. This year, it's been relatively smooth, not the ups and downs in the industry. We're off season right now in this market. As you can well imagine, it's,
Hmm.
cloudy and dreary and not everybody goes out, but we don't hunker down and hibernate. But it's just different, and I think that there's a smarter operator today than there was pre-pandemic because they've survived it.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Now, if you had, let's say you had the attention of the whole food service industry, or at least for your area, what would you say?
Gosh, that's a great question, Nick. I'd say, hang in there, continue to be innovative, continue to market yourself. You've got to get that leading edge. Continue to incent your wait staff or your staff in general to continue to talk to the the folks that walk in the door to dine there. Ask them to do a Yelp review. Ask them to do anything, promote social media through Instagram and Twitter and anything like that so that they can continue to kind of get a stake or a presence in the market. I think they have to be creative to capture the attention of this newer generation. You included, Nick. There's a different
Yes.
approach to those of the millennial stage. They want to be entertained. They want to have a gathering place, not necessarily a quick in and out kind of thing. It's got to be hip. It's got to be good environment. So everyone has to get a little bit more creative in the way they approach the business. And I think one of the things too is to make sure that you're building a trusting partnership with all of your distributor partners, those that you can trust, those that you can rely on, and lean on when you need something. We shouldn't be just a grocery company that delivers the groceries to the back of the door. We have to be the consultant for the restaurant operator, and especially those independent restaurant operators. They don't have, a HR department or a marketing department like the bigger brands, and so we have to be that for them. And so we continuously retool what we can bring to the customer and make sure that we're taking care of them in every which way.
That's fantastic. I Here in Southern California, it seems to me that the Cisco's in this region have picked up market share. I think especially through the pandemic, there's been there's so many moving and shifting parts that happened throughout the pandemic. Competition coming in, competition going out, and now it seems like there's new areas of focus, especially like different ethnicities. I love the food service industry, and one of the reasons is that it is so diverse and there's so many
Hmm.
different walks of life that we get to deal with. And it's really cool to see different cultures play out within the US. And I've made a lot of great friends and connections throughout the years of all different kinds of backgrounds. And I have a lot to thank for to food service. And I think it also provides a lot of opportunities for a lot of different different walks of life as well, whether you want to be on the operator side or a broker side or distributor side, whatever it may be. There's a lot of opportunity out there.
Absolutely.
What would your advice be to a smart, driven person who's just beginning in food service that would want to one day move up and be the president of a distributor or be the vice president of merchandising? What advice would you give to those people?
Well, I definitely say, just to look at every opportunity as an educational opportunity to continue to grow. I think I said it earlier about, don't stay in your lane. I wish I would have pushed myself sooner in my career to kind of look beyond what I thought was, my lane of marketing. But I'd say, anybody could continue to accelerate their career. They have to have, personal drive. They have to be willing to learn. They have to be willing to listen. And I think that that's, one of my mottos is that I live by in my style is to listen, learn, leverage, and lead. And lead is
Mm,
last. Because if you listen to the folks around you and you learn, you're expanding your ability to succeed. But if you leverage the right people around you, because sometimes you might have great people, but they're in the wrong seats. So make
mhm.
sure that they're in the right seat and you're leveraging the power of each individual person, and then you lead. And in that order, I feel sets you up for success because you're also getting the buy-in from the people around you that you need to lean on yourself. So anybody could, join into a food service career, whether they're on the supplier, distributor, or broker side, or even as an operator, and continue to advance their career if they really, really want to do it. But they have to be open to the possibilities, and those possibilities come in every learning opportunity.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. I like that. The four L's. I wrote that down. Listen,
Mhm.
leverage, learn, and then lead.
Mhm.
Um, that is very important. I feel like out of those four right now, I'm big into the learning one. I've been consuming a lot of different books and podcasts, and I feel like it's really allowed me to take a step back a little bit in my business and learn. When I came into the business, I had my dad as my mentor, but I really didn't have any experience in food service. I had never even held a full time job prior to getting into the brokerage business. So I'm going through the phase of I know all four. We're constantly going through all four phases, but the learning one really sticks out to me because I feel like in the last year, really since the pandemic, and maybe you feel this as well, it has shortened the learning curve. I've learned so much so fast, not just about food service, but just about business in general and how to make tough decisions. How do you, as you mentioned, put the right people in the right seats? And, business is not easy. When you look back since the pandemic, is there any new belief or behavior or habit that has most improved your life, whether it's personal or professional?
Well, I'll tell you, yes, there is. And one of the things is, like you, I think I'm a perfectionist. I don't always get it
Yes.
right, but I think I'm a perfectionist. And I needed quickly to learn that I was not going to be a perfectionist in the pandemic, that there were going to be things that were outside of my control. And once I came to that realization, which was pretty early into the pandemic, I had to learn how to let things go. I mean, not to the point of, creating little, dust storms and disasters behind you, but just to the point where you can't control everything. And the things that you can't
Right.
control, you just got to let it go. And that in itself was quite freeing to me. It really kind of brought my stress level down because I was not trying to be the perfectionist and control every situation or every conversation or every decision because there wasn't any possibility to do that. So that to me was probably my biggest takeaway.
I like that. I like that. Kind of almost, I don't know if this would be the right way to say it, but like depersonalizing things. There's this
Yeah.
situation at hand, um, and you have to maybe make decisions or make pivots or whatever it may be, but it's not necessarily you causing the problem. You just have to react to it so that,
Yeah.
you can to move the ship in the right direction.
Hmm. And,
Uh,
to be also really clear about that, Nick, is that a lot of times, you know, I'm I'm being perceived as the steady leader, right? The
Hmm.
people in my organization are looking to me, watching me, and this isn't any organization, it's not unique to me. They're always watching kind of the leader. What is the leader going to say, or what is the leader going to do? And if we're in panic or chaos, or we've got COVID outbreaks, or we've got, layoffs or something along those lines that were happening very early in the pandemic, they're looking to you, right? And they're watching what you're doing. So I had to kind of just be that steady, uh, calming voice in the massive storm we were in, and
Sure.
that too kind of helped me um, take it down a notch from an emotional standpoint. Like you had to just kind of keep it steady. And that became a little bit more of how I've been approaching business now, because although I can still, have my moments of being slightly emotional, it really was the steadiness that I think got me through it, but it also got my team through it.
Yes, that makes sense. So you started in the retail alcohol world, and now you've
hmm
become the region president for Sysco. What's next?
Oh, that's a great question. I've said this to family and friends along the way. People will ask me, "So when are you going to retire?" And I'm like, wait, you're asking me? Like,
Right.
um, you know, I think that for me, I need to get some hobbies, because I
Ah,
can't even imagine retiring and going from, full speed ahead like this to now what am I going to do with myself? It's 10 o'clock in the morning and I don't have a plan. You know what I mean?
right.
So I've got to work on that, and I'm going to work hard on that so that, when the time comes that I choose to exit gracefully out of the food service industry, I've got things
Hmm.
that are going to fill my plate. And I do see myself at some point getting involved in a nonprofit. I
Mm.
don't know why, but it's always been sort of a passion of mine to maybe be part of a children's hospital or a children's hospital foundation or something like that, where I can, bring joy to those in need, and be that steadiness, that calmness that I think I can do.
I love that. I love that. When when you look back on your career, I know you kind of mentioned this a little bit or hit on a little bit. When you look back on your career, when you're all said and done, way in the future, what do you want to be remembered for?
I definitely want to be remembered for somebody who cared deeply about the people in our organization, and that leads with empathy, leads with grace, and also continues to advocate and mentor those to help them elevate their career. I think we all have an obligation to continue to develop those people in our organization to be those next level of leaders,
Right.
because we're not all going to be here forever. And
Hmm.
we need to make sure that we're getting people ready to take on those next steps to fill those seats. And that would be what I would want to be known for, is to continue to do that good work.
I love that. Well, Kristine, I want to say thank you so much for joining me here on the Titans of Food Service podcast. I really enjoyed our conversation. And
Good.
every time I finish one of these, I always reflect back and I think I just learned so much in the time in our discussion. And it's also great to see the world. I view the world through one lens, my own lens, and it's
Mhm.
great to hear other people's viewpoints of the food service industry and success. So just thank you so much for coming on and joining me. I really had a good time, and I learned a whole heck of a lot. So thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. And thanks for the opportunity, Nick. And, if there's ever a time where you want to just give me a call and we can talk further, I love hearing your perspective and watching you with your continued success.
That sounds good to me. Thank you so much,
Okay.
Kristine.
You're welcome. Take care.